have this little Formula Ford in. It has a bit of a misfire sometimes when the customer's doing sprints. He wants to change plugs and leads, maybe change the mechanical fuel pump to an electronic little lift pump, and we're going to give it a dyno run to make sure it's all running right. So this engine has a little mechanical fuel pump here, sucks the fuel up and pumps into the carb here. So what I'm going to do is remove that, blank it off, and I'm going to fit a little electric fuel pump. What I think I'm going to do first is I'm going to disconnect this pipe off the carb and turn the car over and see are we actually getting fuel through the mechanical pump. No fuel there. Yeah, if you're pumping really slowly, it's not really pumping. You have to really give it a... So it's obviously why it was so hard to start. It wasn't really pumping that much fuel, and then when it would start, it would pump properly. Anyway, I don't really have to try and fix that problem because we're going electric. So stop dicking around with it. So in the end of this hole here, there's a cam lobe, and the fuel pump sits in there, and the lobe spins around and just pushes the pump lever arm up and down. That's the pump lever arm. Push that up and down, pumps fuel everywhere, as you can see. So I don't know if the arm's bent and it's not acting properly or not, or just when you're trying to start the car that the cams just turn over too slow to really give the pump a go, because it's probably a bit worn inside. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to blank this hole off and put a bracket here and mount a new electronic lift pump to feed the carb. So I'm just going to bolt that on to where the original pump was. Right. So what I've done is there's a 5 amp fuse here, a connection here to disconnect all that, and I've put a switch on the dash, so it's coming directly from the battery to the switch down here to this. Pretty straightforward. The reason why I left the fuse there is because there's no other fuses in the car, so I'm going to bury the fuse behind the dash, and then if something happens, someone's going looking for the fuse anywhere. At least the fuse is right beside the pump. This car wouldn't start before. The owner had to put petrol down the carb, and it took ages to start it, and then when it would start, it would sort of run okay all day. But I haven't tried to start it. It's absolutely stone cold, so this is going to be the first start. pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I think that started straight away. Really surprised with that. What I'll do is I'm just going to bring it to the dyno and just make sure that the mist has gone out. Apparently had a miss on the back straight in Carcassonne, and sometimes in slow speed corners you could hear it. Possibly was fueling, I don't know, I never heard it. But we'll bring it to the dyno and see. It's absolutely starting, absolutely perfect. I have the little car back in the shed. I'm going to start taking the fuel pipes off and heading backwards towards the tank and see can I see a block somewhere. What seems to be happening is 1 minute it has loads of fuel and the pump's lifting the fuel up and the car's running fine, and then it seems to starve itself of fuel, like the pump can't suck enough fuel up. Now I know the pump's up a little bit high and you say, oh, I'll put the pump down low, but it's within the specs of the pump. It can be 300 mil from the bottom of the tank is what it can lift to, and it's well within that. It shouldn't be running out of fuel the way it is, so I'm going to disconnect the pipe coming into the tank. I'll drain the tank, see how much fuel's in it. So to get the fuel tank out of this car, it's in behind this aluminium bulkhead. The seat sits against that. That's where the seat bolts on there and there. And that's where the filler neck comes down. There's actually a cover that's usually over that. I just took it off a minute ago so you can't usually see that. But there's a line of rivets all along the bottom here, and it's all along the side as well. And then this whole tank comes out. But there's a good few rivets along here, along the side, which means I need to take the side pods off and the bodywork off to get to the rivets along the side. And to get the bodywork off the side, I'll take the wishbones off because they're going in through the bodywork. Got about 11 litres of fuel out of the car. And there is the tank. Another 3 litres, so there's 14 litres in the tank. The The first thing I noticed in this tank when I took it out is the bottom of it's all wet. It's starting to dry off there now. But there may be a small leak in this tank somewhere. It wasn't from me spilling petrol earlier on because the petrol can't get into the bottom of that tank. It's up a tiny bit higher than the floor, so it didn't run back into the tank. It is from being in there. In here is a little bit damp where the tank is sitting. Ooh. Nearly. This was stuck in the end of the pipe. I couldn't really see it, it was just sort of down near the side, but when I fished it out there, you can see that the pipe was stuck onto the end of it. It obviously had got sucked up into the pipe like that, and that's sort of hard there, so that's the problem there. And it must have been occasionally falling back out of the pipe a little bit, and it would sort of work for a minute and then get sucked back into it again. Because every now and again the car had loads of fuel and then it would just starve itself of fuel. And I'm glad I found something. Okay, so the plan is I'm going to make a new tank for this. Okay, so the plan is I'm going to make a new tank for this car. I'm not going to be able to buy one off the shelf that's that shape. I could put a small little tank in there because this car is only used for sprints and hill climbs, but that means the car is stuck for sprints and hill climbs because it has a small tank. So I want to sort of put a tank back in there that's the same size as this, so if it wants to go back racing again, it can go back racing. We could get a bag tank made for it, but it's going to take a few weeks, maybe months, and their life at only 5 years. So we're going to make up an aluminium tank, and that's the tank sorted down for the rest of the life of the car, I suppose. So that's the fuel pickup pipe. That's where that's going to sit, sort of in the centre of the tank, close to the back wall. And I'm going to put this baffle in there like that. So when the car is braking and all the fuel's sliding forward, this is the back of the tank, this is the front. When all the fuel's sliding forward, it'll catch a little bit in there. And then when it's accelerating, all the fuel should make its way back and it can come in here into the sides. And when it's cornering left and right, that is actually a circular shape. So should catch a bit of fuel in it and keep the fuel in there. I might actually bend this around a little bit more. So it should catch some fuel in here. I'll leave that more in the centre like that. I was welding along a flange just so I could get a nice bead in the corner, so I wasn't welding on the flat. And it was pretty nice for most of it with them, but where I broke, it turned out pretty well, but where I overheated slightly or I was moving too slowly, I sort of melted the back off the flange. Can't really see there. Yeah, I just melted the back off a tiny bit and it looks a bit ugly, but for MIG welding, it's okay. Very dirty. This aluminium was all clean and everything was prepped, but just welding with the MIG is very spattery and dirty and smoky. But I'll test that now and make sure it's okay. Fits in there nicely. So I just have to get a spout come out up here, the back of the bulkhead. Rivet everything back together, put everything back together. That fixes that problem. Another thing I have to look at in this car is the brakes. Brake pedal's very soft, and if I look at the balance bar, it's all the movement happening in the rear brakes. This is the rear brakes here. It doesn't feel like they've rear brakes at all. I think the first thing I do, I'm just going to try and bleed it out, make sure everything's okay. There's no air in it, and then I might go look at master cylinders maybe. Of course, my pressure bleeder doesn't fit this car. That's good. Just there, an easy fix. Another thing I want to sort in this car is the gear selector. When it's in gear, that's how much slop you have. It's very hard to tell where the gears are, or if you're in neutral or actually just in a gear. So I'll try to fix that. So a lot of movements in this joint here that's actually just loose. Say the bolt is just worn in the shaft. So I'll take that apart. I might have to re-weld it or re-drill it or sort something out, because I think it was tightened up before and just got loose again. Another problem is this bush in here in the gearbox casing is completely worn as well. So I'll take it all apart and see. I don't actually have any brass to make a new bush, but I'll see what I can do. I'll make it out of something. That hole is worn anyway, for a little bolt that was going through it. Or just too small. We just probably re-drilled that and put a bigger bolt in it. Same with that shaft, that will fix that problem. And this rose joint bush that was in here, I think the rose joint was just loose in the holder, which I can sort that out. But this shaft is actually worn. So how do I fix that? So this rose joint that came out of the gearbox housing is measuring 12.7, and this shaft is about 12.6 in the bit that's not worn, and where it is worn is 12.1. So there's a half a mil of wear on the shaft. So it's obviously 0.1 clearance, and then when I go down here it's 0.6, and that's the wibbly wobbly there. What I was thinking of doing is maybe just weld that and machine it down to the same thickness as this, but then the hole's a little bit big as well. I probably should weld it up and re-drill it, and I'm sort of dicking around, so I think I'll just cut that off and make a new end on it. I have a bit of mystery stainless here, not too sure what it is, but it is machinable because it has threads on it, and I have welded it before. It welds okay. I do have some 316 over there, but I'll make my first attempt out of this anyway. So that's good there. So that's the new bit welded on. It's just welded on here. Gear selector's back on, all the gears are back connected. And that is a million times better. The only bit of movement is in the gearbox. There's a little bit of wear on the fingers, but if you tighten it up too much, it'll be too hard to get out of gear and into another gear. So there has to be a little bit of play there. That probably is a little bit too much, but it's 5 to 10 on a Saturday night. I'm not taking the gearbox apart. I could probably take the finger out, the selector finger out, and put a bit of a weld on it, and like add an extra mil. And it might take a tiny bit of slop out, but that gear selector is so much better now. I'd say the customer will be pretty happy with that. So now we have rear brakes, and we can select gear. So that's pretty good. I suppose next, if we can get it to run, that'll be even better. It's okay. That's it. that all seems good. I think I'll go to the dyno in the morning and make sure that's all running fine and there's no misfires and everything's good.